Throughout history, the story of redemption has always been deeply connected to a people chosen not for privilege, but for purpose. From the earliest promises, the unfolding of salvation has been tied to a covenant, a relationship between God and humanity that began with a nation called to carry divine truth into the world. This story does not end in the past. It points forward toward a moment when history reaches its climax, a moment often described as Armageddon. But this moment is not merely about conflict. It is about recognition. It is about fulfillment. It is about the completion of a story that began long ago. The role of Israel in this story is not one of opposition, but of participation, because the same people through whom the promise first came into the world are also connected to its final revelation. The return of Christ is not portrayed as isolated from history, but as the culmination of it. The story of redemption began with a covenant. The foundation of the redemption story begins not with an event, but with a relationship, a covenant. A covenant is more than a promise. It is a sacred bond that establishes purpose, direction, and responsibility. From the earliest moments of recorded faith history, this bond represented a divine initiative to bring humanity back into alignment with truth. Rather than acting through abstract systems or distant forces, God chose to work through people, through history, through families, through generations. The covenant marked the beginning of a mission. It was not simply about blessing one group while excluding others. Instead, it was about selecting a starting point through which something universal could eventually unfold. The chosen people were entrusted with carrying knowledge of divine law, moral order, and spiritual accountability into a world often shaped by chaos and confusion. Through this covenant came structure, law, identity, and responsibility. The covenant established a framework that would preserve spiritual truth across time. It ensured that knowledge of God would not disappear in the shifting tides of cultures and empires. This relationship was never meant to remain isolated. Its purpose was always outward-facing. It functioned like a seed, at first contained within a specific place and people, but destined to grow into something far-reaching. Through centuries of triumphs and failures, fidelity and rebellion, exile and return, the covenant remained the thread connecting history to destiny. It provided continuity when everything else seemed unstable. Kings rose and fell, nations expanded and collapsed, empires dominated and disappeared. Yet the covenant endured because it was not built on political power. It was built on divine intention. The covenant also introduced the idea that history has meaning, that events are not random, that human actions matter, that choices have consequences. It formed the moral backbone of a worldview in which justice, mercy, and accountability became central themes. Even in moments of fracture, when the relationship appeared strained or broken, the covenant was never fully abandoned. Instead, it revealed a pattern, one of correction and restoration. This pattern would later shape the understanding of redemption itself, because redemption is not about creating something entirely new. It is about fulfilling what was begun. The covenant pointed forward. It contained within it a promise that history was moving somewhere, that the relationship between God and humanity would not remain incomplete, that what began as a calling would one day reach its full realization. This realization would involve not only continuity, but recognition. Recognition of what had been present all along. Recognition of the deeper meaning behind the covenant's endurance. Recognition that the story was always larger than its immediate context. In this way, the covenant became both origin and roadmap. It established the foundation upon which later developments would stand. It connected past to future. It preserved hope through uncertainty. And it framed redemption not as an abrupt intervention, but as the culmination of a long-standing relationship. A relationship that began with a calling, was tested through history, and ultimately pointed toward completion. Understanding this beginning helps illuminate everything that follows, because the final chapters of the story cannot be understood without recognizing where it all began, not with conflict, not with power, but with covenant. History is moving toward fulfillment. One of the most profound ideas found in spiritual reflection is the belief that history is not random or directionless. Instead, it unfolds with purpose, moving steadily toward a moment of fulfillment. This perspective transforms how we view events. Wars, peace, growth, decline, breakthroughs, and setbacks are no longer seen as isolated incidents. Rather, they become part of a larger narrative, one that stretches across generations. From this view, time is not simply passing, it is progressing. There is a difference. Passing suggests movement without meaning. Progressing suggests movement toward something. Throughout history, patterns emerge that hint at direction. Moments of awakening follow periods of darkness. Renewal often arises from crisis. New understanding frequently emerges after seasons of confusion. These recurring cycles suggest that history operates within a framework larger than human intention alone. The concept of fulfillment introduces the idea that history has an end point, not necessarily an end in terms of time ceasing to exist, but an end in terms of purpose being realized. In this sense, fulfillment represents completion. It is the moment when long-standing tensions are resolved, when unanswered questions find clarity, when scattered threads come together into a coherent whole. Many traditions describe this culmination using symbolic language. One such symbol is Armageddon, often misunderstood as purely catastrophic, yet beyond images of conflict lies a deeper meaning. Armageddon represents confrontation with truth. It is the point where illusions can no longer be sustained, where ambiguity gives way to certainty, where neutrality becomes impossible. Seen this way, fulfillment is not about destruction. It is about revelation. It is the unveiling of reality in its fullest form. History, in this understanding, is like a story being written over centuries. Each chapter introduces challenges and developments. Some chapters seem hopeful, others appear chaotic, but all contribute to the narrative's direction. Without this movement toward fulfillment, history would feel empty, a series of disconnected moments without lasting significance. The belief in fulfillment provides continuity. It assures that events, even painful ones, may have meaning beyond immediate experience. This does not diminish suffering or struggle. Rather, it places them within a broader context. It suggests that difficulties may serve as catalysts for growth or preparation, that disruptions may clear the way for renewal, that delays may precede deeper understanding. Fulfillment also implies responsibility. If history is moving toward a defining moment, then actions in the present matter deeply. Choices shape participation in that unfolding future. Indifference becomes less viable. Engagement becomes more significant. This movement toward fulfillment is not forced. It unfolds through time, through decisions, through recognition, through awakening. And as history advances, signs of convergence often appear. Moral questions intensify, global connections deepen, and the search for meaning becomes more urgent. These developments hint that the story is approaching a critical chapter, a chapter where what has long been anticipated comes into focus. Understanding history in this way changes perspective. It shifts attention from randomness to purpose, from chaos to direction, from uncertainty to expectation. It invites reflection on how present moments connect to a larger trajectory. Because if history is indeed moving toward fulfillment, then every generation participates in the journey. And every moment contributes to the unfolding conclusion. Armageddon is about revelation, not just conflict. When people hear the word Armageddon, the first images that often come to mind are chaos, destruction, and global conflict. Popular imagination tends to reduce it to a final catastrophic battle, a dramatic collapse of order. But this interpretation only scratches the surface. Beyond the imagery of struggle lies a deeper meaning. Armageddon is not simply about conflict. It is about revelation. It represents a moment when truth becomes impossible to ignore. Throughout history, humanity has lived with layers of illusion, misunderstandings about purpose, identity, justice, and meaning. Individuals and societies construct narratives that help them cope with uncertainty. Some of these narratives are helpful, others distort reality. For long periods, these distortions can persist. They can shape institutions, they can guide collective behavior. Yet there comes a point when accumulated contradictions reach a breaking threshold, when what is hidden begins to surface. When unresolved tensions demand acknowledgement, Armageddon symbolizes this threshold. It is the moment when concealment gives way to clarity. The conflict associated with it is not solely physical or political. It is moral, spiritual, existential. It is the confrontation between what is real and what has been falsely sustained. In this sense, Armageddon is less about armies and more about awareness. It is the collapse of denial, the exposure of self-deception, the unveiling of deeper realities that were always present but often resisted. History offers glimpses of smaller-scale revelations, moments when societies suddenly recognized injustice that had long been normalized, moments when individuals awakened to truths they previously avoided. These experiences can feel disruptive, even painful, because revelation demands change. It removes the comfort of ambiguity. It challenges established patterns, and it forces reassessment. Armageddon represents the ultimate form of this process, not merely local or temporary, but universal, a global unveiling, a convergence point where long-standing questions find unmistakable answers. The reason this moment is often described in the language of conflict is that truth is rarely accepted without resistance. Structures built on illusion do not dissolve quietly. They defend themselves. They attempt to maintain relevance. They generate friction. This friction appears as struggle, yet the struggle itself is not the purpose. It is the byproduct of transition. Revelation also carries an internal dimension. Armageddon is not only an external event, it is an inward awakening, a realization that affects conscience as much as circumstance. At such a moment, neutrality becomes difficult. Clarity demands response. Choices that once seemed optional become decisive. Paths that once appeared equally viable are revealed to differ fundamentally. In this light, Armageddon is not simply the end of something. It is the unveiling of what has always been at stake. It reveals the consequences of accumulated decisions. It highlights the direction humanity has chosen, consciously or unconsciously. It brings into focus the alignment or misalignment between actions and deeper truth. This revelation can feel unsettling because it removes protective uncertainty, yet it also offers possibility, for clarity enables transformation. Recognition opens the door to change. Understanding creates the opportunity for renewal. Armageddon, therefore, is both crisis and clarity. It marks the exposure of falsehood, but also the emergence of truth. It confronts humanity with reality, but also invites realignment. Seen through this lens, its significance shifts. It is not merely a terminal battle. It is a turning point, a moment when history transitions from confusion to coherence, from fragmentation to understanding, from concealment to revelation. And in that revelation lies the potential for restoration, because once truth is visible, the path forward becomes clearer, even if difficult, even if demanding. Armageddon, at its core, is not about annihilation. It is about illumination, a final unveiling that brings the hidden into the open and compels humanity to see and respond with unprecedented clarity. Recognition plays a central role. At the heart of the unfolding story of redemption lies a moment that is quieter than battle, yet more powerful than force. The moment of recognition. Recognition is not about discovery in the sense of encountering something entirely new. Rather, it is the realization of what was present all along but not fully understood. It is the shift from seeing without perceiving to truly understanding. Throughout humanity has often struggled to interpret meaning correctly. Messages were misunderstood. Signs were overlooked. Truth was filtered through expectation, fear, or assumption. Recognition represents the correction of that misunderstanding. It is the alignment between perception and reality. In the broader narrative of fulfillment, recognition becomes a turning point. It signals a movement from partial awareness to clarity. What was once debated becomes evident. What was once resisted becomes acknowledged. This does not occur through realization. Recognition carries both intellectual and spiritual dimensions. It involves not only the mind, but the heart. One may know something abstractly, yet not fully grasp its significance. Recognition bridges this gap. It transforms knowledge into conviction. In the context of redemption, this moment symbolizes the acknowledgement of truth by those historically connected to its origin. This is not about assigning roles of blame or superiority. It is about participation in completion. The same lineage through which the promise first entered history becomes involved in its final affirmation. Such recognition serves as a powerful symbol of continuity. It demonstrates that the story was never broken beyond repair. That rejection was not the end. That misunderstanding was not permanent. Recognition restores connection between beginning and fulfillment. It shows that history is not a sequence of abandoned intentions, but a process capable of resolution. Importantly, recognition is voluntary. It cannot be imposed. It arises from encounter, from reflection, from experience. It emerges when evidence becomes undeniable and understanding deepens beyond prior limits. Because of this, recognition carries authenticity. It represents genuine transformation rather than superficial compliance. When recognition occurs, it alters perspective. What once seemed distant becomes personal. What once felt theoretical becomes immediate. This shift reshapes identity. It invites reevaluation of assumptions. It opens pathways for reconciliation. Recognition also has communal implications. It fosters unity where division once prevailed. It bridges gaps formed by historical tension. It encourages dialogue rather than opposition. Through shared acknowledgement, former barriers lose significance. In the narrative of fulfillment, recognition therefore becomes more than an individual act. It is a collective turning, a movement that integrates past experience with present clarity. This movement does not erase history. Instead, it reinterprets it. Events once seen as failure gain new meaning within a broader context. Struggles appear not as endpoints, but as stages. Recognition reframes the story from fragmentation to coherence. Ultimately, recognition functions as the hinge upon which fulfillment turns. Without it, completion would remain abstract. With it, completion becomes relational. It connects promise with realization, expectation with understanding, beginning with culmination. Through recognition, the story reaches its intended unity, not by force, but by clarity, and in that clarity, reconciliation becomes possible. The final chapter is about awakening. When people imagine the final chapter of history, they often envision dramatic external events, sweeping changes in governments, visible upheavals, or unmistakable global shifts. Yet the deeper transformation associated with fulfillment is not primarily political or structural. It is awakening. Awakening is an inner realization that changes how reality is perceived. It is the moment when assumptions fall away and deeper understanding emerges. Throughout history, societies have functioned within frameworks shaped by culture, habit, and inherited belief. These frameworks provide stability, but they can also obscure deeper truths. Over time, patterns of thinking become so familiar that they are rarely questioned. Awakening disrupts this familiarity. It introduces clarity where there was once comfort and ambiguity. In the context of the final chapter, awakening represents a shift from passive existence to conscious awareness. It is not about gaining power over others. It is about gaining insight into what truly matters. This distinction is essential. Political movements aim to control systems. Awakening transforms perception. It changes how individuals understand themselves, their responsibilities, and their connection to a larger purpose. Such transformation cannot be legislated. It cannot be enforced. It arises from encounter and reflection. Often, awakening begins subtly, a growing sense that prevailing explanations are incomplete, a realization that long-held assumptions no longer satisfy, an intuition that something deeper is calling for attention. These moments may feel unsettling. They challenge established identity. They invite reconsideration of priorities. But they also open the door to authenticity. As awakening spreads, its effects become visible, values shift, actions align more closely with conscience. Communities begin to emphasize cooperation over competition. The search for meaning replaces the pursuit of mere success. In this way, awakening alters the trajectory of collective life without relying on force. It introduces renewal from within rather than imposing change from above. This inward transformation is crucial because lasting change depends on perception. External systems can be redesigned repeatedly, yet without inner alignment, the same patterns often reappear. Awakening addresses this root level. It reorients motivation, it clarifies intention, it strengthens the capacity for discernment. In the unfolding narrative of fulfillment, awakening serves as preparation. It equips individuals to recognize truth when it appears. It cultivates openness rather than resistance. It enables participation in resolution rather than perpetuation of conflict. Importantly, awakening is not uniform. It unfolds differently across individuals and communities. Some experience it gradually, others encounter sudden insight. Regardless of pace, the outcome is similar, a movement toward clarity, toward coherence, toward responsibility. This process reshapes how history is experienced. Events once seen as chaotic gain context. Challenges once viewed as purely negative reveal instructive dimensions. Hope emerges not from denial of difficulty, but from understanding its role. Ultimately, the final chapter is not defined by domination or collapse. It is defined by recognition, by the moment when awareness aligns with reality, by the transition from partial understanding to deeper vision. Through awakening, the culmination of history becomes not merely an external event, but an internal realization, a turning that begins within and extends outward, transforming not only structures, but the very way existence is understood. The ultimate goal is reconciliation. At the conclusion of the story of redemption lies not domination, victory, or defeat, but reconciliation. Reconciliation is the restoration of relationship. It is the healing of separation. It is the movement from estrangement toward unity. Throughout history, division has shaped human experience. Differences in belief, identity, culture, and perspective have often created distance between individuals and communities. These divisions can deepen into misunderstanding, tension, and conflict. Yet the deeper narrative of fulfillment points toward something else. It points toward repair. Reconciliation does not erase difference. It acknowledges difference while overcoming hostility. It allows coexistence without requiring uniformity. It invites understanding where there was once suspicion. At its core, reconciliation begins with recognition of shared origin, shared purpose, shared destiny. When people realize that their histories are interconnected rather than isolated, the basis for reconciliation emerges. This realization shifts perception. Others are no longer seen merely as rivals or strangers. They are understood as participants in the same unfolding story. Reconciliation also requires honesty. It involves confronting past fractures rather than ignoring them, acknowledging misunderstandings, accepting responsibility where needed. Such honesty can feel uncomfortable, yet it creates the foundation for trust. Without truth, unity gains depth. In the context of fulfillment, reconciliation extends beyond human relationships. It reflects the restoration of alignment between humanity and divine intention. Over time, actions and priorities may drift from original purpose. Disconnection grows. Reconciliation represents the return to alignment, the renewal of orientation toward truth and justice. This renewal does not happen through force. It unfolds through willingness, through openness, through the recognition that separation is neither inevitable nor permanent. Reconciliation also transforms identity. Belonging depends on opposition. But when reconciliation takes root, identity becomes relational, defined not by exclusion but by connection. Communities once separated begin to discover common ground. Shared aspirations replace mutual suspicion. Cooperation becomes possible. This shift reshapes the future. It allows collaboration where conflict once prevailed. It encourages dialogue rather than hostility. It supports growth that benefits all rather than advantage for a few. Importantly, reconciliation is not instantaneous. It is a process. It unfolds through stages: understanding, acknowledgement, forgiveness, commitment. Each stage builds upon the previous. Patience becomes essential. So does perseverance. Yet the direction remains clear toward restored relationship. In the larger narrative, reconciliation signals completion. It brings together what was once divided. It integrates beginning and fulfillment. It demonstrates that the purpose of history was never fragmentation, but restoration. This restoration carries both practical and symbolic significance. Practically, it fosters stability and cooperation. Symbolically, it reflects harmony between intention and outcome. Reconciliation also generates hope. It affirms that past fractures need not define the future. That separation can give way to connection. That misunderstanding can yield to clarity. In this way, the ultimate goal is not merely survival, it is wholeness, a state in which relationships between individuals, communities, and the divine are reoriented toward mutual understanding and shared purpose. Such wholeness does not imply perfection. Challenges may remain, differences may persist, yet hostility diminishes, trust grows, collaboration strengthens. Through reconciliation, the story of redemption reaches its intended conclusion, not through triumph over others, but through reunion with them. A reunion that transforms division into unity and sets the stage for enduring harmony.